Well, we are gathered here today to look into what we mean by arresting deficit snowball and why is it so critical for students, for teachers, especially in the subject area of mathematics. All right, a little bit about myself before I start. I'm based in Singapore. All right, I used to be a teacher like all of you. I served in government school for about 20 years as head of department for mathematics. So in my course of 20 years in Ministry of Education, I am very, very much involved in the sharing of pedagogies, methodologies with teachers, all right, as part of professional development. And I am really passionate about making math comes alive, making math relevant to the students so that they can make sense and meaningful meanings behind the learning. All right. Mm. Okay, let's look at this graphic. Mm. All right, it shows two kids here. They're checking in with one another. Should we abandon all hope and keep plugging onto just grade 4? All right. So what what does this bring about to you? Some students are struggling, some are not. So given teachers, given the same set of resources, students using the same set of resources, being taught by the same teacher, have you ever wondered why is it that some students, they can excel very well within your class, while there are some students, they just find it so challenging. At the same time, do you have students who once upon, when they were in grade 1 or when they were in grade 2, they were performing very well? But just all of a sudden, when they progress on to grade 4, you find them struggling in math. You find them losing confidence. You find them struggling and doesn't want to do math. You have to put in a lot of effort to motivate them. Have you ever considered why? Is it because of attitude issue? Is it because they're playful? Is it because their attention is not diverted to other things such as computer games, digital games? Probably not. That may not be the real cause for students facing challenges in mathematics. So what we are doing right now is we're trying to arrest the root cause. We want to find out what is it that is causing our students to lose confidence. The once upon student who scored all correct in grade 1 and 2, why is it that when they progress to grade 4, grade 5, suddenly they are not even meeting the minimum passing grade? So that is what we want to investigate. And this is also something that we want to bring across to all teachers, the importance of deep conceptual understanding. All right. We want all teachers, all right, to understand that conceptual understanding is something that we have to hold tight to. And it's something that we cannot let go. And what exactly are all this? What is arresting deficit snowball? What do I mean by deep conceptual understanding? This is what I'm going to share today. All right, so let me just share with you what we mean by the definition of conceptual understanding. All right, we want students to have deep comprehension of what they are learning. We believe that understanding is a lot more. It goes way beyond just memorizing the formulas, memorizing the procedure. We don't want students to memorize. We want students to have genuine understanding of the principles, the concept, and not just memorize the procedure. Oh, convert the denominator, make them the same, and then we multiply or we add. We don't want them to do any memorization work. All right. The interconnectedness of concept is also important here. It's allowing students to recognize the relationship between concepts. All right. We want them to understand that, for example, multiplication is an extension of addition. All right. It is not a standalone topic. We want them to understand and not memorize. We want also them to transit through concrete pictorial abstract stages. All right. So concrete pictorial abstract, or in short, we call it CPA, It embodies the conceptual understanding. It starts from hands-on experiences before I move them to visual representation. And finally, to abstract stage where it involves symbols and notations. We also want them to be engaged in symbols, which happens at the abstract stage of CPA. So conceptual understanding is displayed when our students can work directly with symbols and notations. And of course, the last point here, beyond procedures, like what I keep emphasizing on, our final destination for the student is a journey whereby we want them to understand how to solve a problem and not what to do to solve a problem. All right. We want them to know the reason behind, because knowing the reason behind will bring them a longer way. Yeah. So moving on to this slide, we can see from here that there are a couple of important area why we want to emphasize on conceptual understanding. All right. First of all, we want to build the foundation for advanced learning. I believe all of you will agree with me that if we can have a robust conceptual understanding as a foundation for the student, it will allow them to advance into tougher or higher order mathematical thinking and problem solving skills, to which all these are slowly built over time. All right. We also look into mental cognitive strategies. Teachers like ourselves will model these strategies using CPA approaches, indicating the role of conceptual understanding in promoting thinking about thinking. We want students to think about what they are thinking through. It's a higher order cognitive skill that students have to be empowered with. Definitely, we want to enhance independence. So once students have a solid conceptual grasp of understanding, you'll find that students will transit easily from teacher-led sessions to collaborative work or even independent problem solving. We want our students to be able to solve questions, solve math problems on their own without the need for constant guidance and reminders from teachers. Having a deeper conceptual understanding will also ensure better transferability. All right. What do I mean by better transferability? It is concepts will be deeply or more easily transferred to new or unfamiliar situation. We will always start off with real world situation or cases that's happening around the student. All right. But we want them to have a deeper conceptual understanding so that they can transfer this knowledge to areas where they are not familiar with, areas that they are never exposed to before. This will also prevent entrenchment of error. So if they are able to grasp it at a deeper level, you'll find that they've made fewer errors, fewer careless mistakes. The errors are easily identified and rectified on their own.
Yeah, baby.
And in the long run, it will definitely boost achievement score. There are research to prove that students who engage in formative assessment with feedback rooted in conceptual understanding, it shows that there are significant improvement in their score in the long run. All right. Again, we are not looking at immediate result. As in today I teach you something, tomorrow I want to see result. That is pure memorizing. Pupils are just memorizing what you have taught them, the procedure, the formula, and applied it. What we are looking for is a long run. We want to benefit them in the long-term goal. Versatility in math application and promote autonomy. All right. So when students grasp the underlying concept, they can apply their knowledge in various contexts, not just in that particular context, therefore enhancing abstract reasoning. And later, I will show you our framework, our Math Pro P2A2 framework, whereby students will progressively encounter and grasp concept It regulates learning such that this conceptual understanding, it promotes students' self-autonomy in learning. All right. So when we go into snowball effect of a learning deficit, what do we actually mean by that? If we are all math educators, we understand that the nature of math is that it is accumulative. It is a layering concept subject whereby pupils build on their prior knowledge, which they learned from previous year, to learn this year's concept. All right. So the foundational concept or knowledge is especially critical here because the knowledge are built on one another. New skills, new ideas are built on prior knowledge. So if their base is shaky, their prior knowledge is not firm enough, whatever you try or intend to build on it will be equally shaky. So what we want to is right from the start, as early as they're in grade 1, all right, we want their foundation to be very strong, solid, strong. So whatever we build on it is equally strong. All right. We also want pupils to see that the concepts are interlinked. We do not want pupils to have this idea that some certain chapters are standalone chapters and they're learning it because the teachers are getting them to learn it. We want to show them that concepts are interlinked. For example, fractions and percentage, are they linked? Yes, they are linked. They are not standalone chapters. We don't want pupils to walk away thinking that percentage is a brand new chapter, something that they have never learned before. We don't want, we all put it this way, we want to eliminate the fear in students. We want them to know that whatever we are teaching today, they have learned part of it previously. All right. We will have sequential learning, whereby concepts are introduced in a specific sequence for optimal understanding. So like the example I gave just now, percentage and fractions. Definitely we will have to start with fractions, getting pupils to be familiar with fractions before we slowly introduce them to percentage. And students who have a firm foundation in fractions, they will have no problem dealing with percentage. All right. And in the course of what we will experience a lot of revisiting prior knowledge for mastery. And this is especially important because we want to firm the foundation of pupils. We want students to have a firm foundation so that whatever we want or we intend to build on it can be equally strong. So if you look at this, all the more it highlights the cumulative nature of math understanding. All right. And we all know that if there are minor gaps, it seems small right from the start. For example, if I have a student in the lower grade, say grade 1 or in grade 2, um, some teachers will say, okay, it's just a small portion. All right, we can cover it the following year. But when we really move on the following year, these small gaps may slowly snowball to a major deficit. Why do we say so? If you look at small areas, for instance, they are not good in understanding addition. The pupils only know that, oh, they follow the teacher's instruction of regrouping. They have no idea what is the meaning of regrouping. It will lead on to bigger issues later on in later years when we expose them to bigger numbers. All right. Um, this is especially important because gaps, if they are not closed early, it will become wider. So we know that math learning is sequential. Any unaddressed gap in one of the concepts can definitely hinder the understanding of subsequent concepts, not even the future, maybe within the same grade. Using back the same example I gave earlier on, if our students are facing struggle in managing fractions, I would say they will face the same set of struggle when we move them on to ratio, percentage, or even reading pie charts. So one gap leads on to many gaps opening. So it is very important that we close learning gaps in time. The word just in time is especially critical. We should never allow any gaps to snowball into a big snowball, because by then it will be even harder to tackle. And definitely, students, they themselves will have decreased confidence. All right. Students as young as grade 1 or grade 2, they can they can understand their own feeling. They will know that, wow, there's so many areas I cannot do. I cannot do math. All right. I am not good in this subject area. So once they have this mindset, it is very difficult to make them to want to learn or take initiative to want to learn math. It will make them reluctant to be engaged in future learning. And this is something we want to avoid. We do not want to lose the confidence of our students. So with this, real-time insights are especially important. If we do not have real-time insight, real-time data of students' performance, we have to wait for 1 month later, 2 months later, or even when we have to wait for mid-year examination, end of the year examination, in order to find out students' performance, and then we use this data to address a gap, it is a little too late. We cannot afford to wait for 1 whole year or half a year to pass, to wait for the mid-year examination, to get the data of students' performance to address the learning gap. That will be too late. We want real-time insights of pupils' learning so that we can quickly identify where the gaps are, address these gaps before they become bigger snowball. So like what I mentioned earlier on, if the foundational gaps are not addressed in time, they can really result in significant learning deficits. Because we all know math content is just going to get more and more complex as we move on from grade 1 to grade 6. It will never be made easier and easier. The ideas, the skills that we are going to teach will just going to be more and more complex. And when it really escalates to that level whereby it becomes a very big snowball, teachers, I believe you have the same sentiments as me. We'll find it very, very difficult to remediate. All right. Um, it becomes so big a loophole that we do not know where to enter, to tackle, to close the gap. We do not want that to happen. We want to address them when they are still small, when the gaps are still small. I'd rather address a small learning gap than to address a large learning gap, because this small one may lead on to subsequently multiple smaller gaps, which will eventually form a very huge learning gap of the student. So I would say if we allow a gap to persist and we let it go, we don't care about the gap, it will become harder and harder to address it effectively. And believe, all educators will believe with me, we will all want to address it early. All right. So these are some of the um, researchers that they found students who brought over their misconception from primary education to higher education. The research found that they have difficulty in engaging abstract mathematical tasks. They may be doing well in probably the primary education, right? Because they rely a lot on procedural memorization. They memorize the procedure. They are very, very hardworking. The teachers get them to do a lot of drill and practices to the point whereby the student look at the question, they can remember exactly what to do. So they cleared the primary education probably very easily and they scored well. But when they advance to higher education, that no longer works. The memorization work does not apply anymore. All right. So another study conducted by, let's see where, Educational Testing Services found that nearly half of those who could perform the procedures correctly actually did not know what's going on. They only memorized what the teachers are teaching. They only memorize instructions from the teachers. For example, adding of um, unrelated fractions. Oh, when we want to add, the students will know they need to make the denominator the same, so they multiply, and then they do the addition. All right, but they do not know what's going on. They only memorize what you tell them to do. They only do what we tell them. They don't know why they are doing it. All right, and I believe as educator, that is never what we want. We never want our students to just follow instructions. We want our students to be independent learner who have the ability to understand what's going on, make use of this knowledge or concept to tackle problems on their own. And not because we tell them to do that. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do that. It's never what we want. We don't want them to follow strict instructions from us. All right. So moving on to something that Math Pro or Prime Math, we have been focusing on. It's an approach, a pedagogical approach that has been strongly proven to be super effective among students to build conceptual understanding, and that is concrete pictorial abstract. I don't think this comes as something as unfamiliar to all of us. CPA has been a pedagogical approach that is well known, all right, to work for many, many students. All right, so let me just quickly walk you through for those who are not very familiar with CPA approach. All right, it aims to provide or develop deep, sustainable understanding. It is one of the most fundamental learning theories. First, idealized from Bruno's 3 different code, which is the N-active, iconic, and symbolic. And if you look at it, it was first coined way back in 1966. And that's where we already found out that in order to have deeper conceptual understanding, we need to engage students in a procedure, stages of learning to bring them through, all right, to show them the why. And that can only be done through scaffolded learning. All right, so in Bruno's theory, he believes that learners have to first of all start out with tangible, hands-on material before they move on to symbolic and eventually abstract. So by this, using this, learners can build new knowledge upon new knowledge. It's building on. So we do not show them new concepts or brand new standalone concepts. They will always find, oh, this chapter that we are learning today is very related to a certain chapter that we learned 2 weeks ago. So it's something that they can relate from. All right. So if you look at this, this is the N-active, which simply means the concrete. All right. In CPA, we want pupils to have hands-on opportunities to use representation of objects, small items for them to play on, manipulate on. Before we move on, move them to pictorial, whereby it is a transfer of knowledge from hands-on to pictorial representation, whereby all the information, all the concepts are presented either in graph, bar models, pictures, diagrams. Before we move on to symbolic abstract mode, where we use symbols, notations, mathematical language to show them the learning. And in CPA, all right, concrete is something that we can easily find around us. We can use materials all around us, or we can use virtual manipulative, which is present in our Math Pro. So teachers, whether we want to do in-class teaching or whether we want to do online teaching, do we still need to scramble for manipulative. Let's say we want to revise a certain concept. No, we do not need to scramble for manipulative to bring to class anymore. All we need is to open Math Pro and the manipulatives are there. All right. And we have practices and assessments that look into the pictorial abstract. All right. So for concrete, our recommendation is always try to start with real objects. Yes, real objects. All right. Something like chocolates, sweets, if that is allowed in the school, obviously. All right. Or cookies, apples. Get them to hold it. Get them to understand that math is not something that is only in the course book. It is something that is all around them. We want them to embrace math, to know that whatever they are learning are things that are happening around them. We need to build this familiarity. We need them to know that it is not something that is off the world that they are learning. It's something that's happening around. We want them to draw the relatedness. Before, still on concrete, before we bring things like cubes, like buttons, paper clips, for them to have a smooth transition from real objects to items that represent, especially the cubes, the building blocks are especially helpful because building blocks will eventually lead on to pictorial representation where they can find that, oh, it's similar to what we experience. So concrete to pictorial is never a stand-alone stage. It must go hand in hand. So while we are getting pupils to do concrete in a classroom to manipulate with items, at the same time, you will have to show pictorial representation on the board, all right? Or to show it through a PowerPoint presentation. For students to know that that is a relatedness. They see, for instance, they hold 5 cubes in their hand. We will draw 5 cubes on the board. They can see the relatedness directly. All right. So it has to go back and forth, concrete to pictorial, back and forth, simultaneously done at the same time. All right. Until students are confident at the pictorial stage, then we will let go of the concrete stage slowly. If pupils face struggle at the pictorial stage, we will bring them back to concrete again. So it's a process of back and forth until pupils are confident. It's never a one-way, one-directional learning stage. All right, and pictorial, like what I mentioned earlier on, if you have building blocks, cubes, it can lead them on easily to bar modeling later. Or if you have a string, it can lead them easily into number lines later. So all these are manipulative to help pupils transfer knowledge from concrete material to pictorial representation, and which it will move transit slowly to pictorial abstract. So like I mentioned just now, it's never a one-directional learning. It's back and forth, pictorial to abstract, back to pictorial. It is to ensure maximum help scaffolding is provided to students before we leave them at abstract totally. We want to use bar model, all right, to help pupil build up their conceptual understanding, to understand what is going on before we eventually let go of even pictorial. It will have to come to the stage that we have to stop drawing. All right, for example, addition question. When pupils are at the initial stage, all right, say 4 plus 5, you can easily draw 4 apples, 5 apples on the board and to add them together. All right, but eventually as pupil progress on towards higher grade learning, you realize that the numerals will just get bigger and bigger. We can no longer draw the real item on the board. We have to resort to drawing bar models to represent. And that will become abstract for the students. They have to know that every unit, every bar represents a certain number. So before that can happen, we have to start young. get them to know the transitional stage from concrete to pictorial and eventually pictorial to abstract. So exactly what is our instructional design? All right. Our prime math is powered by Singapore Math, whereby the math problem solving is in the core of everything. At the core of our framework, what we want to achieve is pupils are able to learn concept, develop skills for them to solve problems. All right. Solve problem is what we want. So there are 5 main pillars guiding us in our building up of our prime math, which is the aptitudes. We want them to learn math by doing math. All right. Not learn math by listening to you. We want them to learn math by doing it. All right. Because through doing it, learning to mastery will become deeper for them. Deeper conceptual understanding can make more meaningful connection between concepts, between different chapters. Meta connection is our next pillar. We want them to think about thinking. Usually we just want pupils to think again, what can you do to solve this? All right. So probably they will have some solution in their mind already. That's just thinking. We want them to reflect upon that. Think about thinking. Is that the right direction to go? Is that procedure correct? Why is that procedure correct? Is it correct because my teacher told me so? Or is that procedure correct because I understand it so? Which is very important here. All right. So we want pupils to develop this habit about thinking. We want them to make thinking visible. All right. We want them to express their thinking to us so that we can check on their conceptual understanding. Teachers will agree with me, it is very difficult to understand what's going on in our pupils' mind. So in prime math, we pride ourselves in making thinking visible. We want them to tell us, to share with us what they are thinking. All right. And the processes is equally important. Learn math via problem solving. It is regarded not only as a goal, but also as a major tool. We integrate assessment with instructions. It is incorporated into the instructional design so that we can make use of assessment data to provide timely and useful feedback for teachers. And how do we achieve all this? We have to empower students with certain skills. Learning doesn't come as it is. Students are not born with the necessary skill to know how to learn. All right. So we have to empower them with a set of skills. And here we emphasize on readiness, engagement, mastery. It is a phase of learning whereby we tap on their readiness to learn before we engage them in learning. All right. Before we bring them to mastery. So in our prime, you will see that we have this readily built in. All right. At the readiness stage, we have the let's remember, which is an opportunity for teachers, for students to revise prior knowledge, to revise whatever that they have learned, either in previous years or in previous topics. Because a unit that was learned previously may have a significant impact on this current unit. So we want to bring pupils to see the connectedness, to ensure that they are ready, all right, before we move them to engagement for the current unit, all right? And we have the learn and the practice, whereby the learn introduce a concept, we show examples for pupils to know exactly what to do, and the practice for them to practice it in class, all right? And then to find out, did they really learn? How much they have learned? What is it that they still do not know? We have the chapter wrap up and the reviews to show us all this. All right. So this is a screenshot of our course workbook manual, where it is designed for teachers to implement the entire set of program easily and effectively. All right. So the teachers will have this developmental continuum, which to me, this is one very important piece of information. All right. So assuming I'm taking a grade 2 class, all right, I'm starting fractions per se in a grade 2. I know that this year I have to teach pupils to recognize, name a unit fraction up to 1 out of 12, recognize, name a fraction of a whole, which is divided into equal parts. We want them to know how to add given fraction and a whole. We want them to compare and order. But before I can even go into this, one key question I need to ask myself is, are my students ready? Do they have the necessary precursor, necessary knowledge in order for me to do all this? That is the reason why this developmental continuum is very important for me. At a glance, I'm ready to know in grade 1, what did they learn? In grade 1, they learn how to recognize and name half of a whole, which is divided into 2 equal parts. So I already know, oh, they already understood what is equal parts. But in grade 1, they only learn until half. So I would expect them to know half. 1 divide into 2 to form 2 equal parts. Will they know more? If they understand the true idea behind half equal parts, if you were to cut one whole into 3 equal parts, they will be able to give you the same set of explanation. And that's what we call conceptual understanding. And not memorize a pie chart with a line in the middle, that's called half. So that is a big difference. We don't want them to memorize this diagram means half. We want them to know cut into 2 equal parts is 1 out of 2. That is the key thing we want them to learn. So from here, I know what the students must be empowered with. All right. And what I can do to revise, revisit with the students before I even start this year's work. And at the same time, we talk a lot about confidence. We talk a lot about motivation. All right. We have sequenced our learning in such a way that it is built up, a slow built up in terms of difficulty level, in terms of complexity. So in grade 2, I do not want to overwhelm my student with a lot of teaching. All right. I do not want to over teach. All right. I do not want to teach anything that is not in grade 2. Not yet. I do not want to teach them grade 3's work yet. They are not ready. So this will give me a very good idea where I have to stop. Sometimes teachers may just get overly excited and wow, teach a lot, thinking that my pupils seem to be able to embrace fractions very well, all right, and they tend to teach a lot, not knowing that it may incidentally add on to the burden, the learning stress of the students. And that will cause them to lose confidence because they will think that, wow, it's so much to learn. Math is so difficult. There's so much things to learn, which we want to tell the students not so. We take it slow, bite size. We just teach them grade 2's work. All right. So this will tell us exactly where to stop and what they can expect to learn from next year. Students may find it beneficial if they can understand this year I'm learning this. Next year I'll be learning another set. So certain students may find it beneficial for them to know, oh, next year I'm going to compare numerator and denominator. And that's next year's work. Yeah. All right. And our scheme of work will provide very detailed breakdown of exactly what are the math vocabularies we want our students to be empowered with. All right. And this is very important. All right. We want them to know vocabularies such as half, quarters, equal parts. And in later, let's say grade 3, we want them to know certain terms, vocabularies, such as numerator, denominator. We don't want them to share with us that, oh, it is the number above the fraction bar. or the number below. No, we don't want that. We want them to know exactly what they are. All right. And from this scheme of work, you can also have a very good purview of what are the materials required, what are the resources required, in such a way that the teachers do not even need to flip the pages, highlight, and to note down what are the materials. It's already consolidated. All right. Our instructional design is definitely built with CPA embedded into it. So this is another screenshot of our course workbook manual from teachers. You'll see that we give very clear or specific instructions on how teachers can maximize CPA approach. All right. For instance, this chapter whole numbers. All right. At the concrete stage, what can we engage the students with? What can we ask the students? What do we write on the whiteboard? All right, to build that transfer of knowledge. All right, leading to pictorial, leading to abstract. So it's a step-by-step reference guide for the teachers, so that teachers will have a full comprehensive set of instructional guide. Lesson notes are also supported are also supplied to support teachers in learning. All right. So these lesson notes will allow teachers to know what are being taught for this particular chapter. What is the key prior knowledge required? What do we need to do before we even start this lesson? What do we need to prepare to go to class? All right. And the chapter overview will give you a glance of all the lessons so that you can plan your time efficiently. We have 3 lessons here, all right? And the teachers can say, okay, 3 lessons, I'll need to spend how many lessons, how much time rather? 2 hours, 3 hours on the first lesson subsequently. So this allows teachers to do effective planning. Checking for prior knowledge, like what I mentioned earlier on, is critically important when we want to look into the readiness of our student. All right, we have a worksheet that diagnoses the learning gaps of the pupils, their prior knowledge, before we even start. So in the Let's Remember worksheet, should a student not able to solve any questions, it means teachers, we have to close that learning gap before we move on. If the gap is not closed, whatever you try to engage the student with for this year, they will not understand because there was already a gap. There's no way you can build on the gap. All right, so this is one example of a Let's Remember worksheet. Yes, full review of prior concepts and objectives for each task are provided so that you will know exactly what to remediate. All right, so this one can be given to the student. If you look at this one, it's in the course workbook manual. Question 1 addresses a prerequisite from earlier on, which is recognize equal parts. So every question is identified for the teachers. Should they not able to solve question 4, what is the problem? All right, they are not able to recognize and name 1/4. So do we have to revise and revisit all of the prior knowledge? No. I understand teachers, we do not have the luxury of time to revisit everything. We want concise information to know what is the learning gap. What should we revisit and not revisit everything. We want to know exactly where to zoom into. So this will come in very, very helpful. All right. Then moving on to our course workbook. All right. Again, like what I mentioned, CPA is embedded throughout our instructional design. All right. Because we firmly believe it builds deep conceptual understanding. At the concrete stage, in the course workbook manual, the teachers will already be given one set of instructions on how we can maximize the concrete learning experience. So similarly, in the course workbook, we will have stages whereby we want students to be engaged as well. All right, the concrete pictorial and later on the abstract portion, or in the learn portion, and the practice will allow them to do relevant practices. All right, not just in course workbook, We have them in our digital materials as well, our Math Pro. All right. So let's say you are not able to bring into class in time concrete materials. You can always rely on our virtual manipulative, all right, to get students to go through the same set of experience that we want them to go through. So using this manipulative, it is important that we show the pupils how to do it, not tell the pupils what to do. All right. We do not tell them count, form 10 ones, put them in one group, then take away from here, add one here, add one in the tens place value chart. No, we do not tell them. We show them. We make them understand why we are doing it. All right. And that bring us to this digital platform as well, whereby we can use our digital manipulative, all right, our virtual manipulative to do even bar modeling. All right. Whether you're doing online learning, hybrid, or even in class, we can definitely pull this bar model out anytime. All right. And to engage them in full set of instructions before I move them to this, which is the still on concrete, showing you that the course workbook and the coursework for the teachers, course workbook manual, they go hand in hand. That was the concrete. This is the pictorial before we move to abstract. And we have subsequent sufficient practices to determine if the students understood what they have learned. So that forms part of our formative assessment. These are just some screenshots to allow teachers to fully determine if our students have effectively learned what we want to teach them. And before I move on to the wrap up, whereby the teachers can read on this to know what exactly is the learning point to summarize for the students. We talk about formative assessment, and we all know why formative assessment is important. All right. Our practice, we incorporate formative and summative assessment, allowing teachers to have regular check on students' learning. All right. Like what I mentioned earlier on, we do not want to wait until at the end of the year or at the end of 6 months in order to find out how much our students have learned. We want timely, constructive feedback. And how do we make that happen? Given teachers, we have such a rigor, a strong rigor on catching on the assessment of materials, marking of students' work. How can we ensure timely, constructive feedback? Our math pro can do so. All right. So looking at this is a screenshot of our course workbook manual again. It has all the integrated approaches, all right, versatile tools for students to dive deep into the thought process, which is clearly aligned to what we want to achieve in terms of our goal. And if you look at this, oops, sorry, let me go back. Formative assessment. All right, we have our course workbook questions that you can see on the right here for teachers to assign to student either as a classwork or as a homework. All right, and through this, teachers can understand what are the areas that my students are facing struggle in. It forms part of the formative assessment. All right. And in our CPA approach, like what I mentioned earlier on, for the concrete, we have our virtual manipulative to support that strongly. So whether is it an in-class face-to-face lesson or at home hybrid learning, concrete is never neglected. How about pictorial abstract? All right. We have this P2A2 framework, pictorial abstract framework, whereby in our digital practices, it is totally exemplified for all of us. We have questions, pictorial with scaffolding, to help pupils through using pictorial and step-by-step help to get pupils to solve the question. And then we take away the we take away the scaffold. leaving only the pictorial behind. Before I move them to abstract with scaffold, eventually leading them to abstract without any more help. And that is what we want to achieve. So the role of P2A2 in our whole conceptual understanding is especially critical. It helps us to diagnose understanding. All right, the P2A2 framework helps us to determine students' level of understanding based on their performance in the P2A2 questions. The stage of assessment starts with scaffolded pictorial question, then progress to unscaffolded pictorial questions, and then advance in the same manner towards abstract stage. Enhanced feedback allows teachers to actually pinpoint the exact area that our students are struggling in. It can be in the transition between pictorial to abstract or within the stage itself. Differentiated instructions can also come in. By assessing students' performance in the P2A2, teachers, we can tailor our instruction to meet individual student needs. And doing this, it definitely addresses learning gaps. So, example, if a student struggles at the pictorial stage without scaffold, targeted intervention can be applied. All right, we bring them back to pictorial with scaffold again, and we provide help before we take away the help slowly. All right, and then once they're able to do it, we move them to abstract. You can see a strong connectedness of this approach, the P2A2 with the CPA. All right, this integrates concrete pictorial abstract approach. It enhances the depth of assessment and understanding. And our digital practices, and as well as assessment, it gives teachers real-time diagnostic information of students' learning. Teachers will immediately have insights of students' understanding, allowing teachers to really have just-in-time intervention, not even 1 day or 2 days gap. We don't need to wait for the teachers to finish marking the work manually, collate the students' data. It is real time. The moment the students complete digital practices and click submit, the data will be computed. So what is the science behind the scaffolding? Is something that we are very interested to find out. All right, it is an educational technique. It is a technique that we want to provide guidance and support for the learners when they are first introduced to new concept. And it is gradually taken away from them as they progress on, as they gain confidence. All right, to the point whereby they can become totally independent without any help given. All right, and scaffolding is not a new thing. It is very well grounded in Vygotsky's concept. All right, it was first coined by Vygotsky in getting students to go through scaffolded learning and teaching. All right, for them to have deep conceptual understanding. All right, so if you look at this, scaffolding P2A2, all right, it is related to our CPA, our P2A2, in fact, all right, in this manner. All right, this sequence is progressive approach to teaching math. First of all, we engage them in concrete, then move them on to pictorial when they're comfortable. Then we move them to abstract. It is a step by step. And this aligns with the scaffolding. We are building the learning sequentially. So it starts off with a lot of support, then taper off a bit slowly. All right, moving them on to abstract with no help given to them at all. Both methodology prioritize gradual increase in complexity, and we ensure our students are never thrown into the deep blue sea without adequate preparation. The scaffolded stages, all right, it provides students with structured support, guide them through the learning progress, all right, and our P2A2 framework is seen where students are first introduced to problems with a lot of support, both pictorial and abstract. And this is what we want to achieve: independent problem solvers. All right, to a point whereby students are able to perform proficiency in scaffolded tasks, and when it's removed, they are still able to do it. The transition is crucial because it challenges our students to apply understanding without the crunches of external support. All right, and definitely we want to diagnose where they are, their level of understanding. So Math Pro allow us to do that. So you can see from here, we have this LU0 to LU4 stages. And at every stage, it will tell us that the pupils are having proficiency in what area or lacking in which area. So based on the diagnosis offered by this P2A2 framework on the level of conceptual understanding, our Math Pro, it provides critical insight that guide teachers in effective remediation. All right, by pointing out what are the learning gaps, what are the actions the teachers can take to reinforce conceptual understanding before we move them on towards mastery. We have recommendations for teachers to revisit prior knowledge, which is important to activate prior knowledge, all right, in new concepts. And by revisiting, reinforcing prior knowledge, we are closing learning gaps. So these are screenshots of our Math Pro, whereby this is what we will see. All right, when students have completed digital practices or even digital assessment, this is the immediate dashboard that the teachers will be able to see. All right, immediate feedback of students' learning. Where they stand, are they scoring LU1, or LU0, or even LU4, that they are doing very well. We provide teachers with critical insights, like what I mentioned earlier on what to do, what are the learning gaps to close, what to assign to the pupils for further learning. All right. So this is all connected. All right. It is about assessing students' knowledge, finding out what they need to, finding out what they can do, what they can't do. Then we diagnose their mistakes to find out where is the learning deficit. Then we move on to remediation using the critical insights that's provided for the teachers. All right. Um, and the feedback in prime math is especially important. You will agree with me that we want feedback to be constructive, to be timely. We want feedback on pupils' ability to reason, ability to solve problem, rather than to focus on correct, this one wrong, that is right, that is wrong. All right. So when the students make a mistake in problem solving, the teacher can ask questions to guide students to identify, correct the mistake, which will lead to fostering a growth mindset. So if you look at this, you may question, what is the purpose of critical insight? Is that really important? I would say yes. It provides teachers with targeted feedback for remediation. All right. It suggests what the teachers can do. It highlights the specific guide to identify learning gaps. The functionalities is equally important. The data that's generated, all right, allow teachers to, at one glance, identify the specific areas that the students are struggling in, therefore allowing immediate actionable steps. And the recommendations that we give in our critical insight, it will allow teachers to really plan tailored, customized remediation strategies for every single individual students, which addresses the conceptual gaps. It allows teachers to have close monitoring of students' learning as well. And the impact to teaching is very strong. Teachers will definitely love timely feedback. All right. It ensures the teachers know where the students are. It also fosters a very safe classroom environment because teaching is guided by formative assessment. And to close the learning gap, I have two graphics here. As a teacher, do we want to be the bridge? You being the bridge, struggle to hold on to the two ends for pupils to cross. That probably works for the short term. You are helping students to cross over this gap by stepping on your knowledge. But how long can it last? Will you be able to be there for them every single occasion? Maybe not. Definitely not during assessment period. Yeah. So what we want is to show them the way, how to do it, and get them to cross on their own. So this is the entire feedback loop that we are looking at. Our prime math, whether it's our course workbook or course workbook manual, the Let's Remember, Learn and Practice, plus our digital practice and assessment, in short we call it DPA, and our virtual manipulative will really cater to the learning progression of our pupils. All right. And from there, we want to elicit evidence of learning. We want to know what is the area that our students doesn't know. The formative assessment from our the learn and the practice, our math pro reports, all right, the summative assessment via digital assessment, the DPA, which we have the chapter assessment, reviews, mid-year, end of year, will allow a very good collection of students' data. All right, before we move on to feedback and to plan instructional guide, whereby we have level of understanding, critical insights, and recommendation given to the teachers on per student, individual student basis. All right, so that customized remediation can be made. With this, we will be closing the entire feedback loop. I'd like to end off my session with this, which I resonate a lot. Tell me what to do, and I will forget. You teach me what to do, I may remember. But if you involve me in the learning, I learn. Yes?